Good morning. I am Saran Mishra, the editor-in-chief of The Exponent, and I have a very special guest for you this morning. The current PSG president, Mr. Pendergast. Thank you for being on thank you for being with us. And as always, feel free to submit your questions via social media to us, and I encourage you to write a letter to the editor. Before we get started, I want to talk to you about this time period, this very, very shortened time period of PSG elections. It just seems like one of the questions and reactions that we got from the audience was, all right, throughout the year we see these different initiatives, PSG on and off, and then in these 2 weeks, 3 weeks, it just goes PSG. And it's like this big deal. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think we should expand the time period maybe of elections?
The elections right now are 3 days long. Well, 2 weeks of campaigning, 3 days of voting. It's coming from my own experience. It's 2 weeks of very stressful time.
Right.
You don't sleep much. You don't eat much. You do whatever you can to make it happen. I think there's room to look at extending the voting period.
Okay.
To allow more people to vote. But I think 2 weeks is plenty of time to get people excited and get people motivated about campaigning. So if you left the 2 weeks, but you extended the voting period and maybe adjusted the campaigning schedule so that it was 2 weeks continuously and not starting on a Wednesday and going to 2 weeks from that Wednesday, but rather starting on a Monday and going 2 weeks to that Monday, then you could even go like 4 days of voting in the second week or the whole week or whatever it may be. So that way people can vote every day. And so campaigning typically in the last 3 days of voting, campaigning is much more upbeat, much more energetic, and people are much more excited because they want votes. So you extended that voting period.
And we're well on our way to this campaign season.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's this week left, and then next week there's the 3 days of voting. So, it just seems very condensed.
Mm-hmm.
But you touched on a good point about student participation. We'll get into that a little bit. I wanted to get your thoughts about the VP debate last night. Do you think that Joe and Caroline, did they get in depth enough for you on their platforms?
Well, I think the first problem is that it's hard to talk about the position before you're in the position.
Sure.
I think that they personally have a good enough understanding of what their platform is.
Okay.
And the initiatives what they want to do, and having read some of the platform initiatives that they both have and knowing a little bit about them, they are good ideas. It's simply a matter of whether or not the university wants to essentially support those ideas, because ultimately none of the initiatives happen unless you can convince the university that they're important and that they should be given priority.
Right.
I personally wish that they would have gone a little more specific on how they plan to accomplish certain things.
Right.
Different administrators they wanted to work with, or administrators they knew already supported the initiatives.
Mm-hmm.
I know when Meg and I ran, we had talked to Purdue administrators about certain things before actually building our platform, and so it was helpful when we went into the next year, because some of those initiatives were already supported and could move forward.
And that probably gave you an idea of feasibility, or whether it was tangible within that year-long time frame.
Right.
And you being in office now, have you realized that some of the things that you wanted to implement, they were not feasible in a year-long time frame? Is that something that you just noticed right away, or?
It takes time.
Sure.
I would say, and I think when you talk to Mr. Rust, you'll get the same feeling. But after you go through the first semester, you've learned so much that you're much more capable of being in the position and carrying out the job and making things happen. And then when you go into the second semester, you know what's going on. You can push things forward, but then you don't have an entire semester because voting is in March. I think one thing to remember is that the biggest and best initiatives are multi-year initiatives, and so someone's got to lay the groundwork. Someone's got to make it known to the administration this is important, and the next groups come in. For example, the Lifeline Law.
Right.
That was multi-year, a few
Absolutely.
years. I mean, it was a legislative bill that went through and changed how essentially people interact with authorities, and things like that will take a few years and not just one.
Yeah, I think the Lifeline Law is a great example, and for our audience members that don't know what we're talking about here, the Lifeline Law was actually designed by the student governments of IU and Purdue, PSG, and so it's a direct impact, or it showed how much of an impact the student government can have on public policy at a state level.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, carrying that on, I know Attorney General Zeller was here last semester, but carrying that on, or just the policies that have come, to life, to fruit under your administration, is there one that you're particularly proud of, or a few that you're particularly proud of, that you hope that either one of the tickets carry on?
For this, so a platform point that
Yeah, platform point that.
Yeah, one thing that I think really does need to happen is the creation of a core sold out repository. We campaigned heavily on this, and the administration do support the creation of something like this, but at the time when we were presenting it and pushing it forward, they were working on the MyText program, which is now on My Purdue, and so you can see the textbooks that you have for every class. When it was the right time we thought to do this, they said that this should be given priority, and so they didn't want to work on the core solar repository until that was done. And I think going forward, enough groundwork's been laid that a new administration can definitely come in and keep pushing for it and actually make it happen.
Sure.
We had an opportunity we were very close to getting it accomplished along with the MyText program, with the system that they were going to use, but unfortunately ITAP came back and said that it wouldn't be feasible, and so the group that was working on it voted to go forward with MyText first, and then come back to Course by later.
Right.
The unfortunate result of Purdue placing priorities over certain things, over some things over others, but that's the way it goes. And
well, that's a really interesting point. I mean, I guess the advantage that both tickets have is that they were already involved in PSG, so they know how to navigate through the muck, and they know how to deal with the university and then the interaction, or be the middle party between the student body and the university. I mean, that's got to be an advantage. I know you were involved in PSG. Is that, did you feel like that was to your advantage to have that experience already?
Oh, certainly. It's, if anything, it's about knowing how PSG works and the relationship that PSG has with Purdue. If you don't, it would be very difficult if you weren't involved in PSG to understand what PSG's influence is. The influence we have is derived from the fact that we represent students, and that the administration recognizes us as the official voice of the student body.
Right.
And so if we lose that, if we show that we are incapable of doing that, then essentially we lose our influence. We're not a shared governance university, so the things, if we pass a bill, it doesn't become law at the university. If we pass a recommendation, it's simply a recommendation, which is valuable because we can take it to Purdue administrators and say this is what students want. So the minute, I don't think this will ever happen, but if there ever was a day where PSG was unable to function properly and represent students in a way the university felt was adequate, then essentially we would lose our influence. And so it's important for people to remember that our ability to make things done, to get things done, comes from our ability to represent students, which right now we have a very good relationship with Purdue, and we're able to accomplish a lot. But just going forward, for anyone out there that's running or thinking about running or wanting to get involved, that is the influence that we have.
Right. And but I mean, when I was sitting at the debates last night, one of the things I noticed was that both candidates, Mr. Lincoln above McKinney on this, they appeal largely to the PSG members in the audience. So it seems very in-house. Do you think that that perception kind of, or seemingly disenfranchises some of the student population, or the other student population outside of PSG?
Sure. Well, I think it's difficult to say that they appeal only to in-house. There's a lot of if they were doing that, then they would only go to Senate meetings and board of directors meetings and just appeal directly to them. They do a lot of table talks and events. I know Bobby and Caroline hosted a party at Fairway to encourage people to go out, and I know that last time I talked to Stephen and Joe, they were going to the international population to talk to them about their needs. So that I think from what I've heard, both campaigns have been doing a good job of reaching out to bodies that aren't normally interested. And there were a few students, I wish there were more, there that simply came just because it was to exercise their civic duty.
Sure.
And be involved. It is true that most of the people on the individual campaigns are PSG members, and that might just be because that type of student likes campaigning.
Right.
And I mean, I think that there's room to improve on getting other students involved from around the campus, and usually it's mostly student leaders and student organization members that can visibly see, you know, the funding impact that PSG can have, plus some policy impact, et cetera, that are involved. But there are those students that, I mean, there's 30,000 people, and not all of them are in student organizations, that we do need to engage and tell them and show them how important it is.
Well, engagement is important. I know we did a piece on this, I think last week, about number of votes going down, but also number of participants have gone down. And I think Mr. Lincoln brought this up. There's only 3 competitive Senate races. Does that worry you?
It was a little concerning. It's also important to remember that there are only 3 competitive Senate races, but there's 6 or 7 candidates in each of those races, which is a little abnormal. And I wish there were more, and I wish the other Senate races were competitive. It's unfortunate that they aren't. But if you look at the trend of PSG, it kind of every so often it goes up and down about participation.
Sure.
I'd have to look at the numbers and compare the amount of people running from this year to last year. But I'm not sure if you can say that participation is down, but rather diverse participation is down, which you could argue is an even bigger problem. Right. But I think that going forward, you know, we'll do what we can. We're pushing people to vote and get involved, and you know, they can still vote for the presidential candidates even if they don't have a competitive Senate race, and they can still vote for that senator. So they still have an opportunity to be involved.
Yeah, kind of ended with this. Obviously tonight is the presidential debate. Do you have any hopes for tonight? What do you want to see?
Well, I want to figure out who I'm going to vote for. That's the first thing.
You haven't given or endorsed
No.
tickets. Joe has very publicly.
Yes,
I will speak to him about that. But yeah, do you have any? Do you want to see something particular, something from both of the candidates? Or either.
You know, it's some people always raise the fact that they don't think the platforms are attainable, which to a large extent when people run, you know, maybe they're not. Oftentimes that there are a few of them that are fairly lofty goals. I mean, I think we had a few ourselves, but what I really want to see is a drive to learn and adapt to the position. They're going to come into the position, whoever wins, and they're going to find that it's a much different world than they would have than you see from the outside.
Sure.
You sit on a lot of meetings, a lot of committees. You will see faculty get upset with each other. You'll see administrators get upset with each other, and then they'll look to you and say, "What do students think about this?" And you have to represent 30,000 students, and it makes it difficult when you'll say something and they'll say, "Well, what about this? Like, did you think about this student population?" So then you have to adapt, and you have to change your goals, change your platform to do what's best for the students. Because after getting into the office and seeing what's going on at the administrative level, you'll learn that sometimes the platform points you had need to be tweaked, need to be changed. One, so that you can make them work, but 2, so that they actually are beneficial and effective for students.
What kind of advice would you give to Bobby and Steven? I mean, is that it? Just to be able to adapt very, very well, or?
That is a huge part of it. Don't go in thinking I'm just going to stick to my platform and push it through, because you're going to get a lot of pushback if you do that. But the other thing is, make sure you're friendly with people, make sure you're nice, make sure you build friendships with Purdue administrators and the president's office. They are much more willing to help you if they know that you are trying to do what's best for students and you're not trying to be pushy. We have a very good relationship with our university. At other Big Ten schools, it's not like that. There's quite a bit of animosity I've noticed in some of the other Big Ten schools with their universities, and they're very public about it sometimes. And you can't do that at Purdue. You will. Again, we're not a shared governance university. We need to make sure that we're keeping up good relationships and that we are representing students and presenting the information that students give us in a way that is accurate, and that Purdue feels that we are representing them well.
Okay. Thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you for having me.
Once again, I was joined by the current president of the Purdue Student Government, Mr. Kyle Pendergast, and I encourage all of our audience members to submit all your questions regarding the elections. Thank you.